Hi, everyone. Try not to mess this up. I'm Mandy Root Thomson. I'm a self-employed medical illustrator. I am also an instructor of medical illustration at the Columbus College of Art and Design in Columbus, Ohio. I was a student there from 1987 to 1991, where I majored in illustration. And my senior year at CCAD, oh, there it got loud. My senior year at CCAD, I discovered something incredible. I discovered medical illustration, and I thought it looked like just the absolute coolest way to be an illustrator. And at that time, there was a graduate program in medical illustration just 5 miles down the road at The Ohio State University. So I went down there and picked up a course catalog, which you used to have to get in print. You guys remember those? And I took a look at what it took to become a medical illustrator. And when I saw the academic classes that I would have to take, not just to get into the program, but to graduate from the program, I threw the catalog out. Because at that time in my life, I was pretty sure that I was just another dumb artist. And I believed that for the next 15 years. In 2017, over 16 million students were enrolled in high school and college in the United States. This happens to be 1,600. Of those 16 million students, 4.6% have specific learning disabilities. Now, a specific learning disability is a disability disorder that may manifest itself in the imperfect ability to listen, speak, read, write, spell, or do math. And most of that 4.6% of students are individuals like myself, people with auditory processing disorder and dyslexia, which is something I didn't find out until I was 37 years old. Depending on how you look at it, this 4.6% doesn't really seem like a huge group. Only a possible 4.6% out of any class. That's maybe one student in any given class. But when you put them all together, they add up to over 750,000 students. Over 750,000 students don't learn via text. And since most education is set up around the idea of reading and remembering, a lot of the creative students end up feeling like they just are another dumb artist. The most common learning disability, especially in creatives, are dyslexia, dysgraphia, and visual and auditory processing deficits. Because when most people read, they read the word as a whole. They don't read letter by letter. The first and last letter of a word may be the most important letter of a word because they define the word shape more than the other letters. And word shapes matter in reading. Now imagine that the shapes that you're reading can change. Now imagine that the shape of the word you're reading is some strange anatomical term that you've never heard of before. Did anyone get this one yet? And that the shapes can change. There it is. Conventional read and remember education doesn't work for everyone. And in my first semester at CCAD, teaching medical illustration, I had to find a way to get my art students past the notion that they were not academically capable. Unfortunately, in my first lesson, I completely blew it. I went back to the same anatomy lectures that I'd sat through way too many times, and as their eyes glazed over, I knew that something had gone horribly wrong, and I knew that I had to make a change. So I threw aside all of the examples that I had seen in anatomy lecture halls, and I pulled out some tricks that I had picked up over my 13 years that I spent before grad school as a professional kayaking instructor. The key idea being transformation of experience. The way learners interpret and reinterpret their sense experience is central to making meaning and hence to their learning. In outdoor education, a very common approach to teaching is Kolb's experiential learning theory. Kolb's 4-stage cycle explains how an experience is reflected upon, how abstract concepts about the idea are formed, and how active experimentation with the new concept is used to form a new concrete experience. And while in outdoor education, the concrete experience is often quite tangible. That was a cold day. In the classroom, that concrete experience can be a lot more subtle. Hands-on activities like cutting up a piece of fruit to understand a cross-section of the human eye is a concrete experience. But these things don't work if you stand in front of the class and do the cutting for them. The students have to get hands-on and do the cutting themselves. This is a transverse cross-section done by freshman undergraduate student Nolan Warren. So here are some ways that you can bring experiential education into your classroom. First is labeling. Labeling is a quick and easy activity. All you need is a roll of tape or some mailing labels, and the students are going to be really happy to label each other, and sometimes you can even get them to label anatomical models. It's an excellent alternative to rote rehearsal and a great way to teach anatomical terminology. Play-Doh and Sculpey are great for building models. I like Play-Doh because it's cheap and childish, and it's also a bit nostalgic, which really loosens a group up. Here the students are sculpting bodies to understand cross-sections. You can really build anything from a cell to a solar system if you have a few cans of Play-Doh. In this exercise, the students used Legos to start to understand didactic illustration. The students had 5 minutes to build this model using just the Lego parts, no instructions. And then they had 5 minutes using written instructions, but they were written in Bengali, which no one spoke. And then they have 5 more minutes to try to build the same thing with written English instructions, but referencing Lego part numbers. And in the end, they got to use the illustrated instructions that came with the Legos. And at the end of the exercise, we talked about which method was easiest and why that was. In another study, this one was fun. In another study of didactic illustrations, the students made peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. I brought in all the ingredients that I would need to make the sandwiches, and I had the students tell me how to make the sandwiches, and I followed their instructions to the letter. And it made a really big mess, and they started to understand the importance of very precise instructions. And then after that, they worked in small groups, and they each explained it to each other and took reference photos, because this is one of the first draft PB&J didactics that they did in that class. And the next step was to cut this number of illustrations in half, and then to see after that how few illustrations they could break this down to and still get the point across. One of my other favorite activities is what I call the group brain. Several times during the semester, the students are teamed up and asked to draw the skeletal and muscular systems from memory. And these are all undergrads who have probably only ever had a high school science course, and none of them think that they can do this after just a little bit of study. But when I put them all together, they can almost always remember everything. They start out by just drawing the skeletal system as a group, and then they move down to another group's skeleton and they add the muscles, and then they move down to another group's skeleton and they do the labeling, and then they go back to their first drawing, and they're able to get their books out and check for accuracy. Let's see. Along with drawing during the group brain activity, the students can teach their teammates. And teaching someone else is a really, really great way to solidify what you've already learned. Draw along. For the anatomy lectures, I use a draw along format instead of the traditional slides and lecture approach, which is what I started with. I project my laptop and draw anatomy while we talk about it, and the students draw along in their sketchbooks. For learning, drawing is a superior activity such as reading and writing because it forces the person to process information in multiple ways. And unlike listening to a lecture or viewing images, activities which are passive, drawing is active and it forces the students to grapple with the new information and reconstruct it in ways that make sense to them. And drawing also results in better recall because of how the information is encoded in the memory. Plus, the benefits of drawing are not just dependent on people being able to draw. People that are not artists can also benefit from this. So putting any kind of drawing in any of your lectures is going to help all of your students, not just the ones who know how to draw. This is an end of the semester project in the style of Jason Freeney, where the students had to bring together all of the anatomy that they learned all semester. When we do botanical and zoological drawings, we get out to the wetlands and have a local expert from a group called Mad Scientists come out and talk to the students about the plants and animals. Local experts are always going to love to be invited into your classroom. It's an illustration done for the botanical and zoological section. For entomology, we go to another expert at the Ohio State University. The Triple Horn Insect Collection is an amazing collection, and the curator is always happy to give us a tour. And while we're there, the students are able to use the microscope and camera lucida as well, which is just active experimentation time. It's open time. There's no grades. There's no process. They're free to just explore without worrying about grades. Where are we at? Oh, for entomology, sorry, I'm lost my place. We also get hands-on with dried insects, which we rehydrate and mount, which helps the students get comfortable with the insects and really get to know them before they do the measured drawings. Because you never truly know a dung beetle until you fist bumped a dung beetle. This entomology illustration was done by a junior illustration major, Megha Patel. So if I were to sum up what I learned teaching kayaking that you can use in your classroom, this quote by the Chinese philosopher Sun Tzu pretty much sums it up. I'll leave it there a second in case you want to jot it down. What this quote means is really a guiding principle in experiential education. It essentially says, what I hear, I forget. What I see, I remember. And what I do, I understand. And my own addition, what I teach others, I own. So I want to thank you for your time. And since the irony of giving a 10-minute talk on experiential education was not actually lost on me, you can find a link to my Draw Along Anatomy lecture on my website, meddrawstudio.com/about. Thank you very much.